Welcome back to another Macklin in the Middle podcast and the first preview episode of the season. We are going to be back doing these preview podcasts as well as the written previews by different people at the page. But today I'm joined by Connor, who is a Blackpool fan. Appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me. How are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm getting on very, very well, thank you. You know, the sun is shining. We managed to get a point against one of the promotion favourites in the Championship yesterday.
Yeah.
Life could be a lot worse.
It could. There's obviously fans are back in as well, which is always a bonus.
Absolutely, I'll be actually at the game on Tuesday, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Me, my mum, my dad, the whole family, back together again.
Yeah, it's a bonus as well getting on the games because obviously the EFL rules have changed this season, haven't they, with the cup games, so they can't actually be streamed.
No, they
Which
can't
is
be streamed,
frustrating.
not even on iFollow or Tangerine TV or whatever
Yeah,
your local streaming service is. Which, you know, considering it's sponsored by Carabao, which is an international energies drink, you kind of
yeah.
hope that they would at least want to broadcast internationally, but seemingly not.
It's always been weird because obviously I remember when we were playing, I think it was Port Vale we played in the last round, and I was trying to find the stream, couldn't find it anywhere, but so I put Sky Sports News on, and obviously they were showing the goals as they went in. So it just makes me wonder if they've got someone there recording the game. Like, what does Sky or the EFL or the clubs lose from streaming the games? Surely they'd only gain revenue from it.
I don't know. I wonder if it's something around the fact that a lot of these cup formats are now designed to be revenue earners for lower league sides. And I wonder if it's something about not wanting to sacrifice gate revenues. But, just after a pandemic when everyone's absolutely gagging to come back into the stadium anyway, I'm not sure
Yeah,
that needs to be a major worry at the moment.
yeah. Well, first things first. Obviously, you've been under new ownership for I think it's 2 years now.
Yep.
With the previous owners finally giving up in 2019, and I'd imagine that's just been a huge boost to everybody around the club in recent times, albeit without the fans in the ground to celebrate it.
Yeah, we had that golden period when the Oystons were removed and Simon Sadler came in. When we felt like we had our Blackpool back, and there were a couple of games, in the stadium. Then COVID hit, and you had this very long period. Actually, it coincided with the appointment of Neil Critchley as our manager, who has just
Yeah,
been. He seems like a mercurial talent. I think he's built a connection to the fans in a very, very quick way, very, very authentically. Wonder if that's something he learnt from Klopp. And it's just been a joy. I think Simon Sadler's first season of ownership, we obviously got promoted via the playoffs. Neil Critchley's first full season, promoted via the playoffs. There's a lot of. It's really refreshing to have a club with an ownership structure that you can
yeah,
believe in again. A club that feels well run again. And,
with a clear plan.
yeah, present recruitment problems aside, I think everyone now just has near to complete faith in the owners and the executives and the recruitment team and the manager to that they have the talent and they're moving the club in the right direction.
Yeah, and I suppose to people who aren't really like a die-hard football fan, a change of ownership probably wouldn't seem that much, and people probably wouldn't understand why it gets people like back together, gets enjoyment back into going to games. But
Mm-hmm.
as a Sunderland fan, obviously in recent years we've had two changes of ownership. Obviously Ellis Short sold the club, Stuart Donald came in, bought the club with the club's money, and then never returned that money. We went downhill from there, worst finish in our club's history. And then Kirill Louis Dreyfus came in, and it's just changed the atmosphere of the club. There's so many more fans back into the stadium. There's a lot more communication between the ownership and the fans. And like you said there's just a clear plan in place at the club. The recruitment's changed from Sunderland's point of view. We went from signing the likes of Danny Graham, who I think was 35, 36 years old at the time when he re-signed from us. We've now got Premier League talent in young players who,
Yeah.
Tottenham have a sell-on fee on that left back that we've signed, Dennis Serkin, which would have been unheard of in recent transfer windows. And it's, like I say, unless you are a die-hard fan, it probably is quite hard to understand why it does bring everyone together.
Yeah, massively. And, for a club like Sunderland, which is, a massive club, absolute pillar of the community, it's so, so important that pillar is run well.
Yeah,
Um, you know, kind of, it's just so, so critical. And I think what really impresses me is I think people don't understand how much of an impact it has on the successes of the football club. Now because we have an owner that's investing in the club, and I'm sure you're finding similar. You talked about how the club's now prioritizing young talent. We've been promoted. Now we've been able to sign key players like Jerry Yates, etc., on renewed deals, sign players to 3-4 year deals, and start getting the best talent through the door because we're willing to kind of invest in them and not basically because we're not cheapskates anymore. Always trying to kind of offer client footballers 1 year contracts, and it's huge. That is huge for the players themselves, in terms of the confidence they have in the club. It's huge for the fans who have confidence in that the club has a long-term plan, and it's huge to performance because you need the best talent to perform in these very, very difficult leagues.
Yeah, I suppose it helps with recruitment as well, doesn't it? If you're coming into a club where the owner's like, well, I don't really know where I see this club in 2 years' time. I don't know whether I'm going to be here. But now both clubs have now got a clear ownership in place, a clear plan in place. Any players coming in or in talks with the club, they can get along with that plan and look forward to it, and ultimately sign for the club and improve them.
Completely. I think recruitment is one of the things that's noticeably changed at Blackpool. You've mentioned it has at Sunderland. I'm that. I feel confident Sunderland is now moving in the right direction. And I'm sure if this that I think I've already put a fiver on this being your season to come back up. So don't let me down.
We'll try not. But you do find yourself in the Championship now, obviously winning the playoffs last season. When potentially going into the playoffs, you might have been, one of the least favourites to win it. And realistically, I'd imagine it's an outcome that you may not have expected at the start of last season.
I don't think anybody expected at the start of last season that we get, promoted. We obviously made a lot of new signings, which I think really, really helped. But there's always the uncertainty of how good are these players actually going to be. We were aware we had a very, very new manager, and we weren't sure what kind of growing pains there were going to be there. And I think I expected some progress in terms of a gradual move up the table from, I think it was, lower mid place where we finished, along with actually Lincoln, coincidentally.
Yeah.
But 8 weeks into the season, it looked like even that was, too far fetched. We were sitting in the relegation zone, having won very few points from our first couple of games. And then since the October, we turned it around with one of the best sides in the league. And by the time the playoffs came around, we'd bumped into, we'd bumped into third place and felt unstoppable. The fan base had very real belief that this would be our year because our form up until that point since October had been sensational.
Yeah. But you say a gradual rise up the table, but it wasn't really gradual, was it? Because, I remember...
No, exactly. I expected gradual, and all of a sudden we jumped,
just
12, 13 places up to the playoff spots. And, Blackpool with our playoff history and the form, as soon as that became a possibility in the fans' eyes, we all got really, really excited.
Yeah. Because I remember when, obviously, Elliot Embleton, who we will get onto, and I'd imagine you anticipated it, we'll get onto him. But I remember when he signed for you, a lot of the Sunderland talk was, he's not getting too much game time here, get him to another League One club, get him some experience. Blackpool aren't a promotion rival. And then, you'd look at the table 1 week, a couple of weeks later, you'd look and you were above us in the table. Like, what was the turning point in that season?
It's difficult to say. So results really started to turn around, like I say, in October. Colin Calderwood came in as our assistant manager, who I think gave us a little bit more prowess at the back. It's hard to know how much of that was, the effect of the assistant manager. How do you impact? How do you measure that? But it has certainly happened at the same time. We brought in, I think, a key player in Kenny Dougal. The Australian international who sits in the centre of our midfield and just absolutely sweeps up with his bleached blonde hair.
Yeah.
I'm not used to kind of, your holding midfielder winning tackles looking like something out of Baywatch, but he came and he does the job. And we all absolutely love him, especially because of his playoff heroics. So I think it just took a while for the new squad to gel. Obviously, we made so many signings like Jerry, like Kenny. It took a while for some of those signings like Kenny to come in. It took a while for staff like Colin Calderwood to come in, and it just. I honestly just think it was a combination of factors, all waiting for that right moment to gel. And a couple of weeks into season, it happened, and our form became that unstoppable juggernaut. I think best side since October in terms of points in the league.
Obviously, it is very early days in the season, but I think you are third bottom in the Championship, if I believe correctly.
Yeah, we are below, and I think the only people below us are Nottingham Forest, who testing my knowledge of the table here, and then very weirdly Sheffield United, which is certainly not a result I expected. Yeah. We've had a couple of tough games for reasons I'm sure we'll come on to, where we don't seem to be as defensively solid as we looked in League One, which I thought was going to be our strength, but we're still creating a reasonable amount of chances. Particularly some new signings we've made, Josh Bowler, Shane Lavery, they're absolutely lighting up the expected goals and expected assists charts for those that like that sort of thing. And I think in some games, like particularly the one against Cardiff, we were unlucky. A handball decision didn't go our way, and then they scored the counter to get their second. In the game against Coventry, we felt that goal was offside that Coventry scored. So we feel like we've been a little unlucky and the results don't reflect the quality. But then we've just got a point against Bournemouth. And we did just play so much better in that game. And again, it feels like things might be beginning to click again. But we've got a lot of work to do. I think we're still a League One side in the Championship in terms of the players we've brought in. A lot of the players we've brought in are, either from League One or further afield. And if I was a Sunderland fan, I would take that as a main source of hope for Tuesday, which is that Blackpool's side is not too different. Hasn't had a massive makeover from the one that was promoted last year, and which obviously Sunderland was very, very competitive against.
Yeah, and I suppose I think we talked about it just before we actually started recording. But for any Sunderland fans and just any League One fans that are listening, it just shows that promotion doesn't improve the quality of refereeing.
Yeah, there were chants if you don't know what you're doing at the Coventry game.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a problem all leagues have. And I was surprised not to see VAR in the Championship this season. I kind of imagined it would be brought in, now that the Premier League has it, wait a year, the Championship would get it as well, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And I don't know whether that's a blessing or a curse.
Yeah. Well, I said we would mention him, and we are going to mention him, but Elliot Embleton, obviously Sunderland Academy graduate, was on loan at Blackpool last season. And I can't say that I saw too much of him playing for yourselves last season because I didn't. But I did see the goal he scored in what I think was the playoff semi-final. He's come back into our side this season. Certainly warranted his place in the starting 11. Obviously, he's got a goal against MK Dons. Got the assist at home to Wigan in the first game of the season. How much did he impress with Blackpool on loan?
I think he was one of those players who came up with big goals at big moments. You mentioned the playoff semi-final one there. There were times when he would make a big impact in the game, and he felt like a decisive player. And then equally, I think, as is so often the case with young players, there were games where he felt completely anonymous. I think it would be very easy at this point for us to go back and say he's brilliant. We must get him back, whatever the cost, etc. But he was a young player. He was still trying to find his feet. He was getting his first real taste of kind of regular game time. And, you had all those usual teething pains. But, all said and done, I think I, like most Blackpool fans, were absolutely desperate to get him back, because we saw there was so much talent there that could be developed with regular game time. And, once those inconsistencies were ironed out, once those off games were ironed out, you would have a player ready for the Championship. And presumably that's what your board and your recruitment team have seen as well, because, from what I understand, we've made several overtures to try and get Elliot back, and all of them have been rebuffed. So I really do look forward to seeing what he's going to do at Sunderland. I think, you know, the decision to let him go in the first place was probably a mistake, but you're absolutely making the right call keeping him on. He's a really talented prospect, takes corners with both feet, which is, a pet love of mine.
I think the only other player that I can actually think of that does that would have been Santi Cazorla.
Well, if he ends up going to Arsenal and then Villarreal, he'll have a very successful career indeed. But yeah, I think you've got a top player, and we're absolutely gutted to lose him. He'll score the big goal in the big moments, and I've just got to hope that Tuesday isn't one of those moments. The narrative would like it to be, but I sure don't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if the roles were reversed, it would definitely happen against us. It's happened plenty of times. But out of three promoted teams that obviously came up from League One last season, I think you are the only one yet to win a game. Granted, you've had some tough games, got a good point away to Portsmouth, away to Bournemouth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Elliot Embleton is a player that, if you did keep on, if you signed him on a full pre-season with him, do you think he could have changed some of the games that you've dropped points in?
I'm not sure. I think it's a very good question. I'm wary to kind of say that based on, the 4 games we've had so far. It feels like I don't feel like we've ever missed an attacking spark in a game. Like I say, we've been quite good at creating chances. It's more defensively where we've been loose. So no, I don't think he would have been a game changer for the game so far. I think the broader team has performed quite badly. And I don't want to put the pressure on Elliot in terms of he would have saved, and carried the team on its back, because again, he's a very young player and it's unreasonable to expect that. I think for the rest of this season, it could have been very critical indeed. The context there being that Grant Ward, one of our slightly more attacking minded midfielders, he got injured in the Bournemouth game, and we're hearing rumours it's an Achilles, which is obviously extremely concerning.
Yeah.
If we'd really got Elliot back, that would have been, somebody who could fill that gap immediately, and we know and could trust to immediately contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're looking at that kind of spot of slightly more attacking midfielder, and we're not really seeing who's a ready-made replacement or who's next on the depth chart. And so I think particularly now moving forward with that injury and a bit of a lack of depth at the centre midfield position, I think we're going to start coveting and being a little bit more envious of Sunderland for managing to keep Elliot.
Yeah. Well, it is a cup game on Tuesday, and it's always been a competition that usually sees a lot of rotation, from Premier League sides all the way down to, League Two sides. A lot of new faces have come in for Sunderland, like Alves on loan from West Ham, Niall Huggins on a permanent from Leeds. I'd expect to see them start, get some game time. We Broadhead as well.
We were interested in Huggins as well, but it looks like you beat us to him. Again, it comes down to even though
Blackburn win as well, weren't they?
Yeah, even though you're in a slightly lower division, you've got that compelling narrative, you've got that compelling ownership, and you can still attract players even if clubs higher up like Blackburn are interested. Again, we were quite gutted we didn't get Huggins because we desperately need a player in his position.
Yeah, he's one of them versatile players as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he's played left back, I think predominantly for the under 23 team. I think we've really brought him in as a right back. I think it is quite important, whilst you do need a lot of depth in the team, players capable of playing in, a specialist position. Obviously, we've just recorded a reaction podcast there where we're talking about the signing of Nathan Broadhead, who we've brought in predominantly as a striker. But at the same point, while you've got players able to cover, right back, left wing, right wing, you can't have one player to cover all the positions. You've got to have one player for each position to cover, if you know where I'm coming from.
Yep. No, I know completely where you're going from. You've got to have. Coach Critchley really likes those versatile players as well. We've signed a lot of players like that. But again, I'm a traditionalist that you need 2 in every position. Ideally 2 who are specialised in playing in that position.
Yeah. Well, I'd expect to see a lot of rotation from Sunderland. Whether Elliot Embleton starts or not, I'm not sure. But is this a game that you would expect Blackpool to field a strong team for, go out, try and, progress in the cup? Or, like I expect Sunderland to do, rotate players, get some fringe players involved and potentially play some of the younger players? Because at the end of the day, both sides are in need of achieving what they set out to do in the league this season.
I wouldn't be surprised if we decide to focus on the league. Like you say, we haven't won a game yet, and that's obviously extremely concerning for all the supporters and I'm sure the staff. If we need to play a slightly weaker side to get the points, or to try and get points later, I'm sure we will. The only caveat being that obviously we beat Middlesbrough 3-0 in the last round with quite a strong side we put out. And I don't know if that was just Critchley trying to figure out his best side or not. But, he seems to take that game certainly very seriously. I would expect us maybe a slightly weaker side from Blackpool. We've put a lot of pressure on our young, talented forwards, both of whom are actually ex Everton youth players, Shane Lavery and Josh Bowler. They're two signings we made in the summer who have been sensational. Kind of coming on in the first couple of games as impact subs before Josh Bowler at least earned the starting berth against Bournemouth at the weekend. I think because they've had a lot of game time and they've been brought in and trusted to do a lot in a relatively short time. If I was a Sunderland fan, I'd be optimistic that they'd get a rest, because you've got to look after these young players. And you instead maybe see Jerry Yates, Tyrese John-Jules, or kind of other players in our forward positions filling those gaps. I think we're still trying to figure out who our strong side is. And I don't think either any player defensively is super impressed yet, but one. So I'm sure whatever defence you come up against will be fairly weak or fairly leaky until we figure out exactly what our best defence looks like.
Yeah. Moving into the teams that we expect or hope, or should I say expect? We'll use either word, but the teams that we think will start on Tuesday. I'll start with Sunderland. And to be quite frank, I've got no idea who'll start. But I've went with Anthony Patterson. Obviously, Lee Burge was meant to start yesterday. Supposedly picked up an injury in the warm-up, was named on the bench. Patterson came in for his league debut. I'd expect him to start. Niall Huggins at right back potentially. Frederick Alves, who I've mentioned on loan from West Ham, I'd expect him to start. Dennis Serkin, Bailey Wright, Dan Neil. Started at left back again yesterday. Mentioned him in the reaction podcast. I'd expect him to move into midfield to get Dennis Serkin some more minutes at left back. I'd expect the likes of Ellis Taylor, Josh Hawkes, and potentially even a Kim Biogo or someone to feature as well for Sunderland. But from a Blackpool point of view, if you had to try and pinpoint the starting 11, which is very difficult, especially going into a cup game, what would you go with?
Sure. So Neil Critchley seems to have stuck with his 4-4-2 despite a bad run of results. So I imagine that's where he'll stick with again. I think we played more our backup keeper in the last cup games. I think he'll go through in goal. It won't be Chris Maxwell. At left back, I imagine we will play Reece James, who we have as who we can play either left back or central midfield, just to give Luke Garbutt, who's had a lot of game time, a rest. In the centre of defence, I think we'll play Marvin Ekpiteta, who had a phenomenal game against Bournemouth, like really, really good game. So I think he'll be rewarded, and hasn't had a lot of game time until then. I think he'll be rewarded to keep his place. We'll also have Sonny Casey, a youngster we signed from Leeds, who again hasn't had a lot of game time but seems reasonably confident. And then at right back, we'll play poor old Callum Connolly, our centre back who we've signed and who we're making a makeshift right back until we sign a proper one. And the idea of a makeshift right back going up against Aidan McGeady potentially, if he plays, I know he wasn't in your, does fill me with terror. And it's certainly something you'd be looking to exploit. I'm hoping that Kevin Stewart, one of our holding midfielders, will come back from injury and kind of be an anchor in the middle of the park. Kenny Dougal, again, who's still coming back from injury and trying to get fit, will join him there. We'll probably have CJ Hamilton on either the left or right wing. I would say probably the right wing with Keshi Anderson on our left, just to give Josh Bowler a rest, who's been doing a lot of work. And then up top as our two strikers. Jerry Yates scored a penalty against Bournemouth, and I think that was his first goal of the season. So I think Critchley will want to keep him there so he can try and keep building on that. And and keep building his confidence. And then the second striker will either be one of Tyrese John-Jules or Shane Lavery, and I really couldn't say which. Shane Lavery is probably going to get in people's faces and try and make stuff happen. Tyrese John-Jules would drop back and try and make key passes because that's a bit more of his style.
Yeah. I suppose what I will say to any Blackpool fans was if Aidan McGeady does start, which again I don't actually expect him to start, he hasn't actually had a great start of the season. Like I say, we've just done the reaction podcast where we give him ratings, and I give him a 3 out of 10 because he was poor his first touch. And I mean, I'm sure you'll remember him facing against you last season. His kind of specialist move was, to square up to a defender, square up to a fullback. He'd play that heavy touch past him and then get a ball in the box. Yep. Whereas this season, he seems to have lost, I think the saying is a yard of pace, but this season he seems to have lost 2. He really struggles to get the ball, and whether he starts, I don't think he will. Whether he's even on the bench, again, I don't think he will. But I suppose it wouldn't be a worry for you if he is starting, given the form that he's playing. But moving on to the last thing, which is obviously prominent in every preview podcast, I'd imagine, the score predictions. Obviously, the last 2 games that Blackpool played us in, I think they both finished 1-0 to yourselves. Both tight games that we didn't take chances, you did. Completely different game. This is in the Cup, completely different team. A complete new setup for everyone. But I'll start with you for the score predictions for Tuesday's Carabao Cup game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go for 2-1 to Blackpool simply because I never like to predict my own team to lose. I think we've got the quality going forward. I think even our slightly weakened sides can still create a lot. I still think there is that residual question mark about our defence yet. We seem to be conceding, about a goal's worth of chances every game. And I don't understand why Sunderland would be any different. So I'm going to go 2-1, with Blackpool scoring a goal to win it after it's been a 1-1 draw for quite a while.
Yeah, that sounds a bit familiar. And I mean, I suppose you've got to back your own team, don't you? So
absolutely.
I'll go with
Football's about hope. If you don't believe your team can win it, why are you going? Why exactly. Are you watching?
It might be false hope at times, but I'm going to go with a 2-1 win for Sunderland. Well, I think it is going to be one of them games. I don't think either team are going to walk away with the win. 2 good sides, 2 good footballing sides as well, which, I haven't said about too many League One sides, too many Championship sides that were faced. A lot of teams, especially in League One, obviously going back to last season, they'd turn up the Stadium of Light and just sit back and, they'd hoof the ball up, and it was similar to Wimbledon yesterday. Blackpool were never one of them teams, and I think that ultimately that's why, both of the fixtures we had last season, you came out winners. You took the game to us. And I think it'll be much of the same on Tuesday. But again, I think it could all change once we see the team lineups. It could be completely different. It could be a 0-0.
That's the joy of the Cup.
It is. I'm trying to think, does this go to replays, or is it extra time and penalties? Or is it just penalties? Because they've changed the format, haven't they?
I've honestly no idea. I'll do a quick Google for it now.
Yeah.
Carabao Cup.
I'm pretty sure they changed the format, so there was less games being played. But I'm not sure if that was obviously there's 3 or 4 different trophies,
yeah, it goes straight to a penalty shootout now.
We're not notoriously great at penalty shootouts, so.
Yeah, and to your point around, we're not going to sit back. We've been playing a really high line under Critchley, even if sometimes the personnel like Richard Keogh doesn't suit it. And he's very, very committed to that philosophy of taking the game to people, playing that high line. So I'm hoping at least it'll be an exciting game.
Yeah. Well, that is all we have time for on this episode. I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me and preview the game.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No worries. Like I said, we will be back to talk about the Wycombe game, which is on Saturday. Because obviously there's no streams for Tuesday's game, so getting to watch it may be difficult. But we will be back on Sunday and might have a couple of special interviews with ex-players and staff over the next coming weeks or months. But until then, we will see you later.
That's all, folks.